Okay, good afternoon. Now we have a quorum, and the afternoon meeting is now open. Dear members of the committee, before we start our afternoon session, may I say that we are honored by the presence of the Minister of Arts and Culture of Cameroon, His Excellency Mr. Narcisse Muel Kombi, and invite him to say a few words. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellence, Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Comité intergouvernemental pour la sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel, honorables membres du secrétariat de la Convention, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des ONG accrédités, Mesdames et Messieurs. Je voudrais, au nom de la délégation de mon pays, le Cameroun, adresser mes plus sincères remerciements au bureau du président comité pour le privilège et l'honneur qui m'est accordé de prendre la parole ici et maintenant. Ma profonde gratitude s'adresse au gouvernement, autorités administratives et peuple coréen pour la qualité de l'accueil et pour toutes les dispositions chaleureusement et diligemment prises pour l'encadrement des délégations, notamment la mienne, depuis notre arrivée dans ce beau pays. Mesdames et Messieurs, à la suite de la ratification, le 9 octobre 2012, par le Cameroun, de la Convention de l'UNESCO de 2003, régissant le patrimoine culturel immatériel, le gouvernement camerounais a adopté et promulgué une loi concernant le patrimoine culturel. Celle-ci tient compte des dispositions de la Convention de 2003 et accorde une place de choix au patrimoine culturel immatériel cher aux peuples africains. Le Cameroun est une grande nation de culture. Le Cameroun est riche de son extraordinaire diversité culturelle et surtout de son riche patrimoine culturel immatériel. Concernant la mise en œuvre, le décret portant organisation du ministère des Arts et de la Culture a créé et organisé toute une direction du patrimoine culturel constituée entre autres de la sous-direction du patrimoine culturel immatériel. La sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel, pour laquelle cette direction dispose de moyens spécifiques, figure parmi nos missions les plus importantes. Concernant la formation en gestion, dans l'optique de la transmission, le département d'anthropologie de l'Université de Yaoundé 1 propose un diplôme de master professionnel en patrimoine culturel qui traite évidemment du patrimoine culturel immatériel, notamment des questions concernant la gestion appropriée de ce patrimoine. Le Centre international de la recherche et de la documentation sur les traditions et les langues africaines, CERDOTOLA, qui est un organisme international basé à Yaoundé et dont le ministère de la Culture est l'interface institutionnelle, joue un rôle essentiel dans la création d'une base de données et d'un centre de documentation des langues africaines. L'inventaire du patrimoine culturel immatériel est une action qui figure dans la politique culturelle du gouvernement camerounais. Le processus d'inventaire du pays a été lancé en 2015 par le ministère des Arts et de la Culture avec le concours du bureau multisectoriel de l'UNESCO de Yaoundé, du Conseil national des chefs traditionnels du Cameroun et d'autres organismes, ce qui a permis l'organisation par les autorités locales depuis 2016 d'une série d'ateliers sur l'élaboration d'inventaires avec la participation des communautés afin de les former aux méthodes d'inventaire. Les participants venus des 10 régions du pays ont travaillé en groupe en fonction des aires culturelles de notre pays, aires culturelles qui rassemblent en 4 grands groupes plus de 250 ethnies. L'inventaire lui-même a permis aux communautés locales de pouvoir identifier plus de 150 éléments en s'appuyant sur les domaines définis par la Convention. La documentation de cet inventaire, en tant que mesure de sauvegarde, donnera non seulement accès à ce patrimoine, mais également rendra possible la définition d'une politique culturelle systématique en faveur du patrimoine culturel immatériel, tout en respectant les restrictions coutumières concernant l'accès et le caractère vivant de ce patrimoine culturel. Un atelier est programmé d'ailleurs en avril-mai 2018 afin de rédiger, et cela est très important pour le Cameroun, de rédiger les dossiers de candidature des festivals du Ngon et du Ngondo, le Ngondo ayant eu lieu il y a juste 24 heures, des pratiques autour du sanctuaire de Ngokli Touba, qui est l'un des sanctuaires les plus célèbres, les plus anciens du Cameroun, et les savoir-faire traditionnels sur l'architecture Mousgoum dans l'extrême nord du pays. Ceci pour la liste représentative. Les mesures de sauvegarde proposées par les concernés seront décrites plus en détail dans les 10 dossiers. Concernant enfin la coopération bilatérale, sous-régionale, régionale et internationale, le Cameroun compte soumettre une demande d'assistance internationale pour dresser l'inventaire du patrimoine culturel immatériel des peuples autochtones constitués des Bororo et surtout les Pygmées, qui sont les premiers habitants, les tout premiers habitants de la forêt équatoriale africaine. À ce jour, le Cameroun n'a inscrit aucun élément sur la liste représentative et compte avec votre soutien déterminant, soumettre des candidatures en 2018. Tout en vous remerciant de votre soutien habituel, je voudrais, Monsieur le Président, distingués membres du comité, vous remercier de votre bienveillant soutien. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And on behalf of the government of the Republic of Korea, we warmly welcome your honorable presence and the members of your delegation at the Jeju session meeting. Now let us move now to the decision. Please refer to document ITH/17/12.com/5B and this draft decision in para 29. Can we see it on screen?
So we have some amendments.
May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision 12.com/5B as shown on the screen? I think that, Mr. Secretary, do we have some proposed amendment?
Yes, Honourable Chair, we've received written amendments proposed on some of the paragraphs, notably, I think, paragraph 7 and 8.
Okay, if that's the case, we will look over the para by para. Para 1, citing the document we have examined. So I think there will be no objection. Do I see any objections? Para 1, so decided. Para 2, may I consider that you are happy to welcome new state parties? I think there will be no objection. Adopted. Para 3, may I also consider that the committee has no objection to commend the Secretariat for their work in supporting the governing bodies of the convention? I see none. It's so adopted. Para 4, specifically addressing the issue of international assistance. Are there any objections? None. It's so adopted. Para 5, appreciating the support at the country level for reinforcing capacities and welcoming the strategic reflection for the new development of the capacity building program. Are there any objections? None. Adopted. Para 6 is about demonstrating and operationalizing the linkages between culture and the development and the need for pursuing efforts in the context of the SDGs. Do you have any objections? No. I see none. Is adopted. Para 7 welcomes the first steps taken in the field of education and the transmission of ICH.
Amendment by Turkey.
I see amendment proposed by Turkey. You want to take a floor? Okay, Turkey, madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment that we propose goes in line with the statement that we have made, because we believe that UNESCO chairs UNITWIN are important actors within the framework of this convention, so we thought that it would be good to encourage the Secretariat to cooperate further with UNITWIN and UNESCO chairs on this subject. We hope that the committee members would be supportive, but we're also open to any suggestions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. And any other comments? I see none. So can I recognize the distinguished delegate of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have a question on the para 8. So are we already on para 8?
No, not yet. It's just a small amendment proposed by Turkey.
We have no problem with this amendment if you can give us the floor back when we are in para 8. Thank you, Mr. Fuchs.
Okay, there is no objection. So can I take that our committee will adopt as amended para 7? Okay, no objection. So it's adopted as amended by Turkey. Para 8 welcomes the new communication and outreach strategy and encourages the Secretariat to develop a rollout plan. Do members of the committee have any objections? I recognize some proposed amendments by Philippines, Hungary, Turkey, and I recognize the Algeria request the floor. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En fait, nous n'avons pas de souci avec les amendements. Au contraire, nous souhaiterions par la suite nous porter co-auteur du paragraphe tel qu'amendé. Toutefois, nous souhaiterions avoir un peu plus de renseignements sur cette stratégie de communication, de sensibilisation, parce que nous avons suivi les débats au début de ce point et nous nous sommes absteints de prendre la parole pour ne pas encombrer l'ordre du jour, mais nous souhaiterions avoir plus ample information sur cette stratégie de communication, c'est-à-dire comment elle se développe, dans quel sens, comment elle a été approuvée et les conséquences des amendements qui ont été présentés par les collègues de Philippines, de Hongrie et de Turquie. Je vous remercie.
And I recognize the request for floor, Philippines, Hungary, Turkey. So I now give the floor to delegate of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just want, since it's our delegation who gave this proposal, there are 3 lacking words. Let me just read. The Secretary to submit the strategy to the 13th session of the Committee and the General Assembly for its endorsement, although it is reflected in the French draft for its endorsement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippines. I think now it's reflected. And I now give the floor to Hungary, and followed by Turkey. Now, Hungary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have co-sponsored this amendment prepared by the delegation of the Philippines because as it has been expressed before by some of our other colleagues, we believe that the committee and the General Assembly should have a role and should endorse this strategy. We welcome the presentation by the Secretariat, and we regret that this was not included in the report because it would have been different if we could have seen this beforehand. Thank you.
I now invite the distinguished delegate of Turkey to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, along the same lines of my colleague from Hungary, we also co-sponsored this amendment because we thought this is an important subject, and we have seen from the presentation that the Secretariat has done a comprehensive study on this. But we also want to see somehow the committee being engaged in this process. So that was the reasoning why we have co-sponsored this amendment. It should be through the committee and the General Assembly for its endorsement. But of course, we would also like to hear from the Secretariat how they want to plan, what is the timeline for this communication strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. Now, representative of India, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that I'm taking the floor today, I would like, on behalf of India, to thank the government of Korea and Ambassador Lee in particular for inviting us to this beautiful island of Jeju and for the excellent arrangements that have been made for this session. We would also like to thank the Secretariat for their excellent work in this new strategy based on SDG 4 and for the comprehensive presentation given by the Secretary, Mr. Curtis. But at the same time, I would like to support the amendment made by Philippines, Hungary, and Turkey that we require more information and some more deliberation before we adopt the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, India. And now, distinguished delegate of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is only a question regarding terminology, because, I mean, I'm not a native speaker, but rollout plan seems to be more active than a strategy. So does this have any kind of effect on the work that was planned on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. Now, Cuba, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. On voudrait soutenir aussi la proposition, mais je voudrais faire référence à le paragraphe 7 qui s'est déjà adopté, mais je pense qu'on ne peut pas réduire seulement ces coopérations avec l'échelle UNESCO. Il y a des autres ressources comme les centres de catégorie 1 et 2 qui peuvent travailler aussi pour cette stratégie, pour tous les processus. C'est une recommandation. Je sais bien que c'est déjà adopté, mais s'il n'y a pas aucun problème pour le reste du comité, on peut rajouter au fond de la décision, avant de son adoption finale, ces deux questions, les centres de catégorie 1 et 2, et des autres ressources que l'UNESCO travaille aussi. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Cuba. And I see no more speakers on my list. So, many of the delegations request some additional information from the Secretariat. So I think it's time to give the floor to our Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before coming to the communication strategy, I'd just like to reassure Cuba on paragraph 7 that we mentioned the UNESCO institutes, and it could be better explained, but we meant Category 1 centers in education and possibly Category 2. It could be better explained, but that's what we meant by institutes. Yeah, I do realize there's confusion and concern about the communication strategy, and perhaps we could have done a better job to explain it. But I'd also like to point out that in a strict sense, the reporting period in the report is until June 2016. And some of what we have done, June 2017, not 16, of course. Some of what we did was since then, so it was not in the official report. The budget to work on what we have worked was approved under other functions of the committee through the Bureau, as is always the case, where upstream work is done. So we are by no means ready to, we were never intending to present a strategy to adopt at this stage. We are in the early stages of working on this, as was requested, as was endorsed by the budget of the Bureau, which we'll be coming to in the next item. We probably didn't do well in choosing the word strategy, because we're not talking about a strategic document in the sense of budget and programming and a planning document in that strict sense. What we are working on are tools and to basically enhance and improve our communication. As I said, we did an audit of the communication, including our web, the way we've been communicating, looking at the press, with the budget that was allocated under 20%. It was originally our intention to come with a more comprehensive presentation to this committee at this stage, but frankly speaking, we were just overwhelmed with other work and were not able to finalize it in time. So the idea of this decision was to inform you that it's going on and to do a more enhanced preparation, a presentation at the General Assembly and then possibly to the next committee. So we'd like to present the working tool. We don't see it, at least we hadn't conceived it, as developing a kind of statutory strategy on communication at this stage. What we had planned and what we had worked on was trying to get a communication agency to help us develop tools to improve our communication and clarification about the convention, but also something that when we said rollout, that we could share with the state parties, national commissions, Category 2 centers, other stakeholders, so that there's a language around the convention, because we notice a lot of, let's say, press articles that are not on target, a lot of confusion in the press around the convention. So I fear our word strategy, which is the word we used with a communication agency, because that's the language we use, but has a slightly different meaning, or quite a different meaning when it comes into a statutory context, may not have been the right word. I would have now think a word such as framework would be better. And of course, it was always our intention to present it, but it's not something we thought was something to be endorsed, because it's not like a directive or an operational directive or something. It's a way of enhancing the communication and an idea of giving tools. So I understand that we didn't communicate this properly, I think, in the way we prepared the documents. But this work was not done strictly in the reporting period up until June 2017. My slight concern about asking us to submit a strategy now in that sense is we won't be ready and it may lock hands. I would feel more comfortable being invited to share the progress on the work we are doing, which has been approved under the other function of the committee. We were thinking of doing something at the General Assembly to share with the broader state parties and perhaps come back to the committee to share. I don't think we're at a stage where we're going to have a strategy in the sense of a statutory strategy. And in fact, that's not really what we were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Okay, I recognize the distinguished delegates of Palestine. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So after the intervention of the Secretariat, of course, first of all, we support the amendment submitted by Philippines, but it seems to be that there might be some confusion using the word strategy. Can we use instead development of communication and outreach tools? Yeah, instead of strategy, and we should, in that case, the Secretariat to submit the information about the communication and outreach strategy tools. Sorry, so it would be maybe a little bit more comprehensive. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. So, Mr. Tim Curtis, can you add up something?
Yes, I think we're much more comfortable with the word tools. Again, if it's except that we won't be ready by the General Assembly with all the tools finalized. We see this as the work under the approved 2-year work, so we will be working, we intend to keep working on it. So that's why I'd be comfortable with words update, inform. But if we have to do something to adopt, then that means it stops at that stage. Yeah.
Now, Arjari.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Si j'ai bien compris les explications du secrétariat, donc nous sommes sur le point. Donc avec ce point-là, nous parlons d'un update d'une politique ou d'une stratégie, ou appelons-la comme bon vous semble, mais quelque chose qui a déjà été adopté et sur lequel on est en train de faire une mise à jour. C'est bien ce que nous avons compris? Ou nous sommes un peu perdus là?
Yeah, it seems to me that, Mr. Secretary, you just clear the clarification.
No. What has been approved has been under the 20% allocated to other functions of the committee to work on communication and outreach. That's all that's been approved. There's no strategy that's been approved. We didn't think we were developing a strategy in that sense. It's true, strategy is what we've asked this company to provide us, but it's different when a communication company does a strategy. It's different to a statutory strategy. It's the tools. So that's why we think this, we put it here to inform the committee, but we're not ready yet with these tools to show you them. We intended to be, but we just haven't been. So perhaps it could be to ask the committee to share the tools and inform, but, and the word strategy was probably an unfortunate choice of word, sort of mixing between the two contexts. Also, in terms of rollout and implementation, the idea that we had, which is where the working of the other functions of the committee is meant for, is when we develop material at the global level, for example, in capacity building, we use those funds to develop the material, and then we look for extra budgetary funding to actually implement it. So there's no funding here for actually implementing a whole strategy. It's to develop the tools so that hopefully we could get extra budgetary money to then implement what may be activities, or share the tools with state parties who may wish themselves to do communication campaigns around intangible cultural heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. And I recognize once again the distinguished delegate of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that you asked that we refrain from taking the floor more than once, but this point is very important, and we seek for more clarification. And now with what the Secretariat has told us, that we are able to deal properly with the Para 8. Et c'est pour cela, Monsieur le Président, que nous souhaiterions faire justement un amendement sur ce paragraphe après avoir écouté le secrétariat. Et après avoir fait cet amendement, nous aurions un commentaire aussi que nous souhaiterions que le secrétariat prenne en compte. Donc, ayant écouté le secrétariat, nous souhaiterions amender le texte tel qu'amendé là actuellement, et qui dirait donc le début resterait la même chose, prendre note de l'élaboration donc d'outils ou de stratégies de communication. Nous n'avons pas de problème avec le mot stratégie de communication. Et sensibilisation visant à améliorer la compréhension et la visibilité de la Convention, et demande au secrétariat d'informer régulièrement le comité et l'Assemblée générale de l'évolution de cette stratégie. Donc nous souhaiterions en être informés. Pourquoi je dis cela? Parce que il semble que cette information soit passée et l'approbation de ces outils soit passée uniquement par le bureau, et dans le sens où vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que nous sommes en train de faire un effort dans toute l'organisation, dans l'UNESCO, pour l'uniformisation des rôles des bureaux à travers tous les comités et toutes les conventions, afin que les bureaux ne soient pas, qu'il n'y ait pas différents plans de travail d'une convention à une autre, et que l'égalité et l'équité soient respectées partout. Donc c'est pour cela que nous souhaiterions que ce type de décision passe plutôt par le comité que par le bureau. Voilà, ça c'était pour le commentaire. Concernant l'amendement, je pense que tel qu'il est porté à l'écran, on bifferait donc de soumettre à la stratégie à la 13e session du comité. Si les auteurs des amendements sont à l'aise avec ça, nous sommes aussi à l'aise avec le reste. Nous souhaiterons juste que cela soit pris en compte. Je vous remercie.
So I think it's time to hear the comments from Turkey and some other original proposals of amendments. I recognize the delegates of Turkey first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we were also, after listening to the Secretariat, we were also of the view that we should amend the amendment to inform regularly the Committee and the General Assembly. But should we say again the strategy here or something else? Maybe we could, as regards the development of the communication and outreach tools, I don't know the formulation, maybe Secretariat could help. But if we say strategy again, it will come back to the same original problem. Thank you.
Yeah, quite relevant. So, yeah, Mr. Curtis?
Could we suggest framework? A framework with tools? I think that might help move outside this idea of a strict strategy. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. I recognize the distinguished delegate of Palestine, and followed by a representative from Côte d'Ivoire, and Hungary, and the Philippines. So Palestine, followed by Côte d'Ivoire, Hungary, Philippines. Now Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to take the floor again, but actually the amendments submitted by Algeria and Turkey was the same amendments that I wanted to submit, but actually there is one thing to be clear here. So development of the communication and outreach, I think it's better to keep the word tools. Once tools and once framework, I prefer instead of framework, it should be tools. So this is the first amendment. Can we reflect it on the screen, please? Yes. And then the final thing, I think in that case, with all these amendments, we can skip for its endorsement because we are talking about regular information, so no need to mention endorsement. So I think we can skip at the end for its endorsement. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. After hearing delegate of Palestine, I think instead of Côte d'Ivoire, if you permit me, I think the Philippines, you'd better take the floor now.
Mr. Chairman, we can agree with the amendments stated here. It's just that basically we just want to reiterate that the strategy statement, the word strategy was taken from the Secretariat paper. But of course, we understand that the explanation made. Secondly, it's just that, that's true, the development of a communication and outreach tools. I think what is a better word is tools towards the development of communication and outreach. Because I think that's a better way of drafting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now, Côte d'Ivoire. Yeah, you have the floor, Madam Ambassador.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En entendant les commentaires du secrétariat, la Côte d'Ivoire adhère tout à fait au terme outils, parce qu'il nous semble qu'il s'agit plus d'outils que de stratégie. Ce faisant, la Côte d'Ivoire propose d'alléger le paragraphe 8 de la manière suivante. L'élaboration d'outils de communication et de sensibilisation visant à améliorer la compréhension et la visibilité de la Convention et demande au secrétariat d'en informer régulièrement le comité et l'Assemblée générale, point. Avec le mot « en », ça enlève tout le reste de la phrase. Et demande au secrétariat d'en informer régulièrement le comité et l'Assemblée générale, point.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now let's continue. I give the floor to distinguished delegates of Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My delegation would also like to thank the Secretary for the clarifications brought to this point. Indeed, we also think that the terminology of tool or framework is much more fortunate. So we very much support the amendment of the amendment in this sense. We would also like to include the rollout plan that was originally in the decision, because if it's understood in this sense of tool or framework, then we think it's important also that the Secretariat continues with the work on the rollout plan as outlined by the Secretary. So if that could be fit into probably inform regularly the Committee and the General Assembly as regards the tools for the development of the communication and outreach strategy, as well as the rollout plan for its implementation, something like that. Or if for you the outreach tools include the work on the rollout plan, then that's fine with me. But the important point is that the Secretariat carries on with all this work, because we want our communication to be more proactive, more vibrant, as soon as possible. So we don't want the process to be frozen and stopped because of these considerations. We would like this process to go on, but at the same time be kept informed. And the last point, if I may, to my fellow delegate from Algeria, via you, Mr. Chair, as also Chair of the Bureau, my understanding was that the Bureau never decided anything on this issue substantially, in terms of substance. The Bureau only did an assistance, a budgetary authorization, which is in its power to do. So if you bring it up as an issue of governance, then I, as also member of the Bureau, I can confirm that the Bureau remains strictly within its statutory remit of what it can do and what it can authorize. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. And I recognize the permanent delegate of Guatemala. So you have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Since this is the very first time that the delegation of Guatemala is taking the floor, I would like to express my congratulations for your election. And at the same time, we would like to express our gratitude to the people and the government of Korea for their hospitality. regarding to this point, we would also like to add the word impact. Since the purpose of having this kind of tools is to have an impact as well in the knowledge. So the proposal is as regards tools for the development and impact of the communication and outreach strategy. Since we are very much, I know probably at the beginning it's not easy, but since we are very much in UNESCO based on results oriented, I mean, we not only want to do things, we also want to have an impact in the things that we do. So if that's the proposal. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Curtis, you just wrap up your latest language.
Yeah, perhaps I think some of you repeated the word strategy, but my sense was what was the point was to take out the word strategy. And what we are talking about is working on tools. At this stage, there is nothing to present to you to actually approve for its impact or so on. So I do feel we may be jumping the gun, so to speak, by already getting into those issues. What I'm hearing from the room is an encouragement to keep working in this direction, but a sense to keep informed the committee and the General Assembly before any decisions are made around this. And this is how we understand it. So perhaps, because there's been quite a bit here, we could look at having asked the Secretariat, I'm just trying to look, sorry, as regards tools, now as regards the development of communication and outreach tools, and then perhaps, as Hungary said, we can consider the rollout plan for its implementation as part of those tools. We delete that. And Ivory Coast, la Côte d'Ivoire, a suggéré de juste finir d'informer régulièrement le comité et l'Assemblée générale. Donc après, il reste à savoir si on doit faire référence spécifiquement au 13e. Inform regularly the Committee and General Assembly of communication as regards the development of communication and outreach tools, and maybe it could step there. So we're not talking about plans and we're not talking about strategies.
Okay, Palestine.
Sorry again to take the floor, Mr. Chair, but I think that we had a suggestion by our colleague from Côte d'Ivoire that was very clear. Now, ça devient illisible. I think what our secretary has mentioned also was absolutely reasonable and acceptable. Let me read it to be clear. It should be read like this. Notes the development of communication and outreach tools with a view to enhancing the understanding and visibility of the convention, and requests the Secretariat to inform regularly the committee and the General Assembly, period. And that's it. It becomes absolutely understandable without mentioning the third. It's when you say regularly, then it will be regular. I think that the main purpose will be kept in that case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We are almost we are arriving at conclusion, and I recognize the Philippines and Cyprus. So first, Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. We can go along with the recent formulation on the understanding that the next session of the General Assembly as well as the next session of the committee shall be updated. And just to explain again that the raison d'etre of the whole amendment was that we believe that the committee does play a role in the development of these tools, both in its preparation and its implementation and eventual rollout. As Mr. Curtis presented this morning, it's a joint effort, so we feel that the committee, in accordance with its mandate, should be involved in the development of these important tools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Philippines, for your spirit of consensus. And now I give the floor to distinguished delegates of Cyprus. Madam, you have floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je crois que c'est mon collègue de Palestine qui a donné la réponse. Je suis aussi tout à fait d'accord avec la Côte d'Ivoire qu'il faut qu'on arrête les textes parce que sinon on charge trop les paragraphes et on ne sera pas très clair. Donc ce serait bien d'arrêter. D'ailleurs, vous voyez, on ne voit même plus le texte maintenant. Donc je suis d'accord, comme elle a dit ma collègue de Côte d'Ivoire. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Cyprus. Now, I'd like to ask the Secretariat to put on the screen the clean text.
A should be removed before communication.
Hungary?
Thank you. Just a small missing, definite article is missing from in front of General Assembly and the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. Any other comments? I see none. So can I take it that our committee has decided to adopt Para 8 as amended? Any objections? I see none. It's adopted. Para 9 is about our concerns regarding decline of extra budgetary support for the implementation of the capacity building programs despite strong demand for its implementation on the ground. Are there any comments, objections? I see none. It's adopted. Para 10, expressing our concern regarding the human resources of the Secretariat. I think there will be no objections. So it's decided. Lastly, Para 11 is a call to state bodies to contribute to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund for both operational projects and the reinforcement of the human resources of the Secretariat. Do you have any objections? Seeing none, it's adopted. We have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. Seeing no objections, I therefore declare decision 12.com 5B adopted as amended. We move on now to item 6 of our agenda concerning voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. Allow me to remind you that the committee has two main tasks as regards the management of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. The first task for the committee is to propose a biennial plan for the use of the resources of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund for the approval by the General Assembly. And in fact, this is what we will do under item 7. This plan only applies to assessed contributions paid by state parties under Article 26 of the Convention. The second responsibility for the committee concerns the approval of voluntary supplementary contributions. They are contributions made by state parties in addition to their assessed contributions for the implementation of activities that cannot be supported with the resources of UNESCO's regular budget. Since UNESCO has been facing particularly difficult financial situations, such voluntary supplementary contributions have been very important for the implementation of our convention. I now leave the floor to Mr. Curtis so that he can present this item to us in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. As many of you will know, the financial structure of the 2003 convention is rather complex. Before moving ahead, I'd like to remind you and underline that the reporting period for this item on voluntary supplementary contribution is from the 11th session of the committee last year until October of this year. As a background, to remind you that at its ninth session, the committee approved the concept note for 2014 till 2017 under the former structure of the complementary additional program entitled Strengthening Capacities to Safeguard Intangible Cultural Heritage for Sustainable Development. That was decision 9-7. This relates, of course, to the Global Capacity Building Program initiated and delivered by the Secretariat, which I reported on earlier. Now, this concept note will expire at the end of this year, at the end of next month. So by approving this concept note, the committee accepted voluntary supplementary contributions made to support capacity building activities between two committee sessions and authorized the Secretariat to make immediate use of such contributions. Under this reporting period, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund has not been benefited from any support, any contribution to support the capacity building program. However, I do have some good news. The Secretariat received a confirmation on November 20 of a contribution made by the Netherlands, which will allow the continuation of the capacity building project in the Dutch Caribbean islands and Suriname. We are thankful for this support, and this contribution will be included in the report for the next session. Under the reporting period, there were 2 earmarked contributions that are not related to the capacity building program, and they are reflected in Annex 1. Firstly, $300,000 United States from the Cultural Heritage Administration of the Republic of Korea to improve the periodic reporting mechanism under the convention. Secondly, $100,000 United States from the People's Republic of China to organize the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group on developing an overall results framework for the convention, which was held successfully in Chengdu in June 2017. So please allow me to give more explanation about Annex 1. The information provided here responds to a 9-com request to be informed of all voluntary support given to the convention during the reporting period, whether channeled or not through the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. This is why this annex includes information concerning voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund to carry out specific earmarked activities, as well as contributions to the sub-fund of Intangible Cultural Heritage of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund for enhancing the human capacities of the Secretariat, which was established by the General Assembly. The annex also includes information about new projects approved under the established funds in trust, as well as loans and secondments of personnel. In the recent past, the main funding requirements for implementing the Convention has concentrated on extending the reach and effectiveness of the global capacity building program and strengthening the human resources of the Secretariat. I would like to take this opportunity to explain the evolution of the resources mobilized in this regard by referring to two graphs included in the working document. These graphs collect data for the last two biennia and the current biennium. Regarding the support of the global capacity building program, the graph shows a decline since 2012. Shows a steep decline since 2012, which comes down to its lowest point this current biennium. The mobilized resource reached only 56% of the 3 million biennial objective set by the committee at its 9th session. Support to the convention through funds and trust arrangements remained stable during the last 3 biennia, thanks to the generous contributions aiming to strengthen national capacity in different regions of the world. 7 Southern African countries benefited from support given by the government of Flanders in Belgium. 5 countries in Asia Pacific receives funds from Japan to undertake the second phase of capacity building activities. And 4 countries in the Arab states have received support from the Abu Dhabi Tourism and Culture Authority in the United Arab Emirates. While we are grateful for these generous contributions, we do take note of a decline in the amount of contributions from some of the regular donors. However, the overall decline showed in the graph is explained by the critical decrease in contributions made by state parties through earmarked contributions to the fund. During the reporting period, only $110,000 were received from the government of the Netherlands in support of capacity building. This was the contribution that was reported to the 11Com, and this does not include the most recent contribution I've just mentioned, which is out of the reporting period. So in a nutshell, the flow of contributions is very unstable, with a general trend showing the amount of contribution is declining. So what are the implications of this situation for the Convention? It simply means that it will be difficult to guarantee a satisfactory level of support for national safeguarding efforts through our capacity building program. More concretely, the Secretariat has identified that at least 41 countries could meaningfully benefit from capacity building support, but they could not be supported because of the lack of contributions. They were identified either through needs assessments, external evaluations, or through direct requests made by states. Of the 41, 19 are in Africa. The situation is no way better concerning the support, of course, to the human resources to this fund for the human resources of the Secretariat, which has never reached the target which was sent by the General Assembly of 1.1 million United States dollars, but neither has it ever been at such a low level since it was established in 2010. Since the 11Com, the sub-fund received voluntary contributions totaling $22,408 from Monaco, meaning a decrease of 70% in relation of the 2 previous biennia. So essentially, there is no money left in the sub-fund for human resources set up in 2010. Of course, this decrease is especially important given that many of the mechanisms we've discussed are increasing, and this has been discussed earlier in the report. So in light of the expiration of the 2014-2017 complementary additional program, the Secretariat is bringing to the committee for approval in Annex 2 2 new funding priorities for the period of 2018 to 2021. These new funding priorities are built in line with UNESCO's new integrated budget framework that sets out the organization's overall funding requirements for the next exercise, the 39C5. The first funding priority seeks to continue efforts to extend the reach and effectiveness of the global capacity building strategy with a target of $5 million, while the second aims at initiating efforts to incorporate intangible cultural heritage into formal and non-formal education in cooperation with the education sector with a target of $2 million. In line with the decision taken by the Committee for the Concept Note for 2014-2017, which was Decision 9-7, if approved, any voluntary supplementary contributions received between two committee sessions within the scope of these two funding priorities will be considered accepted by the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your very clear presentation. It seems to me that the situation presented by the Secretary is extremely worrying and deserves the attention not only of the committee, but more generally of all state parties. Therefore, I'd also like to express my gratitude to those who provided their support to the Convention and its Secretariat since our last session, namely the Abu Dhabi Tourism and Culture Authority, Japan, the People's Republic of China, the Principality of Monaco, and the Republic of Korea. It is also an excellent piece of news that the Netherlands is getting ready to make an additional contribution to the fund so that a capacity building project in the Dutch Caribbean islands and Suriname can go on. I would like also to thank the Secretariat for all their work during this biennium, being able to comply with increasing obligations, maintaining a high-quality standard, even though contributions to vital tools as the sub-fund dropped by 70%, as already presented by our Secretary. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? No. I see Turkey and Côte d'Ivoire. The first distinguished delegate of Turkey. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the report before us. Unfortunately, as just been presented by Mr. Curtis, the voluntary supplementary contribution situation is not very promising. While global capacity building program has been crucial for the implementation of the convention, unfortunately, the extra budgetary funding had been in constant decline, as a result of which the Secretariat could no longer be able to deliver the capacity building services. We believe we have to address this issue together with the agenda item 7. On one hand, while the fund for international assistance has been accumulating, on the other hand, voluntary contributions are reducing. Under these circumstances, donors will continue to question the need for further funds when there are unspent funds still available. The committee should consider a long-term approach to address both sides of the coin. We should look into the broader resource mobilization strategy of the convention in the context of the structured financing dialogue that will be launched in the margins of the 204th session of the Executive Board, together with the underutilized fund of the convention. We also need to look at the funding situation of the convention as a whole to identify where the obstacles lie, what is needed to be done, how to address this irony. We believe that ad hoc working group could be mandated to analyze this issue. We need to know more about the funding system of the convention, to analyze it and identify the procedural or any other sort of obstacles, and accordingly make some proposals for the committee to consider. In this regard, we will submit some amendments on this issue under agenda item 13. Regarding the two priorities in the report, as far as we understand, the first priority relates to the continuation of the complementary additional program, with more emphasis on sustainable development, which we support. With regard to second priority, we attach particular importance to formal and informal education for the safeguarding of ICH and its transmissions to future generations. Our Ministry of National Education has added a course in the curricula entitled Folk Culture, which embraces the principles set forth in the Convention for Safeguarding and Transmission. Our Ministry of Culture and Tourism has been registering the tradition bearers under different titles, providing for them to sustain their art through master-apprentice relations. Within this context, One Master, 1,000 Masters program has raised a substantive awareness and consciousness for safeguarding. The UNESCO Chair, Intangible Cultural Heritage in Formal and Informal Education, established in the Gazi University in 2017, has begun to work towards an enhanced and ICH-supported approach to the formal and informal education subjects through undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral education and museology studies. The Turkish National Commission for UNESCO, ICH Institute, and Gazi University has been organizing winter schools for ICH. With this perspective, we find this priority extremely important. In relation to its implementation, we know that field offices are those who are in charge of implementing the operational projects. In fact, the field offices have been empowered in many ways as a result of the delegation of authority decision of the DG. Although simplification of processes are welcome for the better delivery of the problem, close cooperation and coordination between the headquarters and the field offices are critical in terms of achieving expected results. Regular consultations is needed between the headquarters and the field offices from the first stages of planning to other stages of execution, monitoring, as well as reporting of the program and projects. With this understanding, we would like to be further informed by the Secretariat about the working relations between the field offices and the headquarters. Secondly, it is mentioned in the funding priority 1 that training and advisory processes may also include relevant institutes, NGOs, universities, and community representatives. We presume that those stakeholders mentioned in the report are those accredited to UNESCO. Finally, as we understood, this is the end of the complementary additional program that was relevant for 2014-2017. And in this committee, we're about to launch a new program for 2018-2021. We would like to know whether CAP has been successfully implemented and whether its outputs have been achieved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Turkey, for your intervention. But once again, try to be as brief as you can. On my list, Cote d'Ivoire, Philippines, and followed by Austria and the Republic of Korea. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Cote d'Ivoire. You have the floor, Madame Ambassador.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout d'abord, Monsieur le Président, avec votre permission, remercier le secrétariat pour le travail qui est fait et pour l'exposé très clair qui nous a été fait. Je voudrais remercier au nom du comité, si je peux me permettre, les pays qui ont apporté des fonds, la Chine, le Japon, la Principauté de Monaco, la Corée, les Émirats, et on vient de nous dire également que les Pays-Bas promettent de nous donner des fonds. Monsieur le Président, je ne veux pas anticiper sur le point suivant, mais j'ai l'impression qu'il y a quand même une petite incompréhension entre ici l'insuffisance des fonds extra-budgétaires qui sont annoncés et le point 7 où on nous dit que l'utilisation de l'assistance est insuffisante, la sous-utilisation des fonds dédiés à l'assistance internationale. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas imaginer une stratégie de compensation ou quelque chose à faire parce qu'il y a comme une contradiction entre ces deux points. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We echo the concerns in the document and of other committee members regarding the declining level of voluntary supplementary contributions, which often provide a lifeline for carrying out needed activities. We thank those states parties which have contributed in this regard. We support the two funding priorities, but like others, would appreciate more information on how these were selected. We would also like to flag that the committee, in accordance with its mandate set forth in Article 7D of the Convention can play a more proactive part in increasing the resources of the ICH Fund. Some inspiration could be taken from the recent efforts of the World Heritage Committee to enhance the sustainability of its fund. The 1972 committee adopted a roadmap for the sustainability of the World Heritage Fund with indicative targets and short, medium, and long-term measures. Ideas such as a core group or group of friends on ICH and a donors forum may be worth exploring. For instance, there could be opportunities for ICH committee members working with the Secretariat and the underutilized extensive network of accredited NGOs to consider creative means to increase mobilization of resources. Such difficult situations need innovative approaches. Again, we see the informal ad hoc working group as a practical platform where such discussions can take place at minimal cost. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your very constructive intervention. I now give the floor to Austria.
Thank you. Under item 5 of the agenda, we have discussed the activities and the importance of capacity building activities and for the implementation of the convention. And thanks to the dedicated efforts by the Republic of Korea and China, as well as Japan, the United Emirates, and now Netherlands and also Monaco, the work for intangible cultural heritage got an additional boost, which is indeed highly appreciated. However, unfortunately, we also have to note the trend to the decline in the resources mobilized for capacity building program. We think we have to be realistic in terms of our fundraising policy and prioritize our additional projects accordingly. Thus, we welcome the proposed 2 funding priorities, which are capacity building and ICH and education. What is particularly interesting about the latter is its link with the 2030 agenda. If already decided upon, we would be interested to know how many countries you envisage for participation in the second funding priority, and what the newly established clearinghouse for integrating ICH in education implies in terms of infrastructure, human resources, and functions. Let's hope the 2 funding priorities will be an inspiration for state parties to contribute accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. Now, Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We would like to express our gratitude to State Party for making generous voluntary contribution for the implementation of the 2003 Convention. Especially, thank you, Netherlands, who recently decided to make a contribution. And we would like to echo to our colleagues from Turkey and Philippines. We also welcome to funding priority for the period of 2018 to 2021 entitled Strengthening Capacity to Safeguard ICH and Contribute to Sustainable Development and Safeguarding ICH Informal and Non-Formal Education. We firmly believe that intangible cultural heritage represent value and practice that make us who we are, and it is of utmost importance for future generations to learn its value. In this light, we welcome the initiative to underline the importance of transmission by setting the priority on education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Republic of Korea and Hungary and Cuba. First, I give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief since a lot has been said before. Simply to thank the Secretariat again for a very transparent reporting and a sobering picture at the same time. Hungary also fully supports the funding priorities put forward, namely capacity building and ICH and education. We are also grateful to the countries and the states that have given financial support in this last year. But we would also like to ask whether any attempt has been made to mobilize resources from the private sector. Indeed, this convention is gathering really a large visibility and obtaining large visibility. But in the funding sources that we see, we only see states giving financial support. has the private sector been called to support, and has there been any successful fundraising activity? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. Now I give the floor to Cuba.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis un peu perdue parce que ce débat que nous avons ici, c'est un peu disconnecté de qui nous vient d'adopter à la 39e conférence générale. Nous avons adopté un budget intégré qui justement parle des budgets ordinaires et aussi tous les fonds extra-budgétaires. Je voudrais savoir si le secrétariat peut m'expliquer un petit peu quelle est la projection qu'il y a concernant à ce sujet, comme sera l'application de ces budgets intégrés qu'on vient d'adopter à la conférence générale pour tous les secteurs, pour tous les compétences de l'UNESCO dans ces conventions, comment on va se réfléchir dans la réalité. Et nous sommes aussi d'accord avec les priorités et on veut remercier à tous les donateurs de ces conventions et de ces fonds. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Cuba. And from the Senegal. Okay, I recognize the distinguished representative of Senegal.
Je voulais m'associer aux derniers collègues qui ont proposé des mesures tout à fait peut-être jusque-là pas utilisées, envisagées. C'est peut-être innovant, c'est peut-être délicat, mais effectivement, pourquoi ne pas chercher du côté également d'un partenariat public-privé dans le sens de la mise en valeur de certains secteurs du patrimoine. Je pense que cela se fait déjà au niveau du patrimoine matériel. Est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité effectivement de l'envisager au niveau du patrimoine immatériel? De la même manière, la proposition faite par la Côte d'Ivoire mérite d'être, oui, approfondie. Est-ce qu'il y a des mécanismes qui peuvent permettre une réaffectation de ressources par rapport aux priorités? Si c'est le cas, la sous-utilisation de certaines ressources pendant qu'on a des préoccupations absolument indispensables à résoudre, est-ce qu'effectivement, il ne faut pas réfléchir sur des mécanismes qui permettent une réaffectation, une réallocation des ressources? Je pense que cela, à une situation exceptionnelle, des mesures exceptionnelles. Je pense que c'est un peu dans ce sens que je voulais intervenir de manière très brève et bien sûr remercier, exprimer notre gratitude à tous les donateurs. Merci.
Thank you, Senator. And I see no more speakers from the committee members. I now give the floor to observer members. I give the floor to distinguished delegate from Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor to make a statement in our capacity as observer. First of all, we'd like to thank the Republic of Korea for hosting this committee. We also thank the Secretariat for the clarification of this agenda. About the two main founding priorities, we would especially like to welcome the proposal entitled Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Formal and Non-Formal Education. We consider that this is very timely, as now in various fields, we are attaching much importance to policies which keep in sight the SDGs. We intend to continue our cooperation with UNESCO and the member states to contribute further to the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Japan. Okay, thank you. Let us move now to the decision. Please refer to document 06 and this draft decision in para 13. Can we see it on screens? May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision 12.com Ah, okay, all right, okay. You're taking up the decision. Yeah, I recognize the representative from Cuba and Palestine. Yeah, Cuba first.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense qu'on va un plus rapide, mais j'espère que le secrétariat peut nous donner quelques informations concernant les questions qu'on avait données concernant la projection des budgets intégrés et la perspective à l'intérieur de la Convention. Je pense que ça, c'est important avant de passer à la décision. Merci.
Okay, thank you. And Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no problem with the decision, only with one paragraph in the decision. So if we can proceed paragraph by paragraph in order to address my concern in paragraph 6, namely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, as Cuba asks some of the additional information and some of the answer from the Secretariat. Now I think, yeah, Mr. Tim Curtis, you can, yeah.
Thank you. I think there was a few questions, and some of them I noted. One, I think, asked by the Philippines, how we chose the two funding priorities. Another one on Austria, on the second funding priority. If I understood the question, it was how many countries it was meant to cover. Perhaps I didn't understand exactly. I think Turkey asked, was it Turkey that asked for a review of the capacity? No. One country asked for a review of the capacity building program and its result. And then there was the question by Cuba on the integrated strategy and several questions relating to private sector funding. First of all, the two funding priorities, one is a continuation of what has been continually stated as a priority by the committee members over the years, which is the capacity building program. We are now ending the period, so we propose to renew that for another 4 years, since what we have heard has been that this remains a continued priority over the many decisions of the committee over the past years. The second funding priority is a new one, and we are now proposing it to you precisely because both the interest in this area that has come through some of the formal but also non-formal discussions, the references to ICH and education in Articles 2 and 14 of the Convention, of the text itself in the Convention, are why we are proposing these two funding priorities. If I understood Austria's question on the second one, then I understand that the question is about how many countries are expected to be a $2 million target would allow us to work in. If I understand that's the question, our estimate is somewhere around 10. We expect projects, our target would be about 10 countries if we were to attain that funding. As to the review of the capacity building program, we have not been able to yet do formal review of the overall of all of it, but we have had several opportunities to do some kind of review. First, the iOS audit in 2013, which identified very clearly the capacity building program as a successful program and encouraged to continue and expand. Secondly, as I said earlier, two of the large extra budgetary funded projects did have their own project review mechanisms, so those are available. And finally, I think the question for Cuba concerns the integrated budget framework, which was recently adopted by the General Conference. I will let our administrative officer discuss the technical issues, except to say that we have tried to present these proposals within exactly that framework. But perhaps the administrative officer of the culture sector. There was a question also on private funding, which the director of the division might be able to answer afterwards. Thank you.
Oui, merci. Donc, concernant cette question de budget intégré, si vous avez remarqué au niveau du paragraphe 10 du document, on a déjà fait allusion à cet aspect-là. Et je peux vous assurer, parce que en même temps vous êtes État partie, mais aussi État membre donc, durant la préparation de 39C5, et spécialement, donc, on parle du scénario 518, qui est vraiment le scénario opérationnel. Pour la Convention de 2003, il correspond au résultat attendu 6. Et pour le résultat attendu 6, bien sûr, on a tenu compte de tous les aspects. Le budget opérationnel, programme régulier, qui est de, on va dire, 2 700 000 pour tout le biennium, siège et hors siège, plus un montant de contribution volontaire de 14 900 000. Mais ce montant de 14 900 000 englobe aussi toute la globalité du fonds, du budget sous le fonds, y compris les fonds qu'on n'arrive pas à mettre en œuvre parce que c'est ce qu'on va voir au niveau du point 7. Donc, en un mot, le budget intégré a été appliqué. Nous avons tenu compte à la fois des programmes réguliers, des contributions volontaires, et aussi, il y a une estimation de gap qui a été faite pour arriver au montant global pour le résultat 6, qui correspond à la Convention de 2003, et tout ce montant-là s'élève à 19 100 000. Alors, si vous voulez plus d'informations, peut-être on peut voir ça d'une manière bilatérale avec la déléguée du Cuba, si vous voulez plus d'informations sur les aspects techniques. Je suis disposé à vous les fournir. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted only to respond to the question on the private sector funding, because in fact, especially in the current funding and financial scenario, we have been looking very seriously at a variety of ways in which we can raise funding, and this has been ongoing, of course, for several years. And if I may, there's a link also with the communication tools that we have been working on developing in order to be able also to reach private sector donors and make it attractive for them to be able to support intangible heritage, because for them to understand what it is they're funding is also important. But there is also an issue with the private sector funding that we have encountered very often, particularly when we are looking at a convention where so much of the emphasis is on capacity building and on something that is related to specific communities and so on, and also when it's related to a multi-donor fund. Private sector donors very often are reluctant to donate to multi-donor funds. They would like their name attached to a fund. They also would like to bring in something else, some components such as visibility for their own work, or to give some exhibition or demonstration in a way that takes the intangible heritage element out of its context. So it's not very easy to retain the integrity of the convention's work and promote it in the way that the committee would like to, along with private sector donors as partners. Of course, this is something we are working on, but just to flag that it is not as straightforward as one would imagine, because of the kind of pressures that private sector donors feel in terms of such a partnership to be able to have their connections to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, for giving me the floor. I think I need to give some clarification, because, you know, budget issues are always very obscure. And I know that, you know, among you, some people are very, very, you know, proficient and expert on budgets, and others are not. And I can see a lot of, you know, question marks in your eyes from the podium. So let me explain just very simply what's happening. In the past 2 years, UNESCO has decided to produce a new type of budget, which is the integrated budget. Integrated budget essentially puts together the resources that are under the regular program, based on the contribution of member states, and everything else that we can raise out in the outer world through fundraising operations. Why was this done? Well, I think it's very clear that there is an objective of transparency and coherence. Transparency with regard to the member states that set the priorities for the C5, for the program budget, and coherence in the fact that we try to put together and somehow show how the different fundings contribute to the priorities that have been established. That's the principle. And what you have seen, perhaps, in the new budget is essentially the first time that this has been done. Now, although this has been done, and in terms of numbers is there, I cannot say that it's fully finished as a process. In fact, this process is now supported by another process, which we call the structured finance dialogue. Essentially, it's a way to entertain relationships with donors, so that they can see also, it's transparency versus the donors, they can also see what are our priorities and the way we operate. This structured finance dialogue, once it is fully achieved, will actually result in a very integrated budget. We are in the process, in the transition process. I don't think we have achieved yet full coherence between the different mechanisms, but this is the first time this is happening, and I think it's clearly say directed in this direction. Now, that said, we have to deal with something that it's clearly a market for donors. The market is public or private. When we go to a member state and offer a certain product, we do a marketing for a product that is called the Intangible Heritage Convention, and we try to convince the donor, even if it is a member state, that this is better than another product that he can buy, excuse me for the term, on the same market, whether at UNESCO or other organizations. So what's really important is to define the object, the product that we market. And this is really an important, say, change, cultural change for the convention, for the cultural sector, and for UNESCO. We are doing it. I'm not saying that we haven't tried in the past years. I think we are quite advanced. And as I said the other day, our extra budgetary funds nowadays are bigger than the ordinary funds. We have I think 56 million for the biennium of extra budgetary funds and 43 of regular programs. So we are already over 60% of extra budget. But clearly it's not easy. It's not easy to go to a private sector agent and say, no, we have the fantastic product, the Intangible Heritage Convention, please finance it. It doesn't work like this. It works in a very different way. We have to convince both public and private operators that what we are doing is something that has a return from them. Now, clearly the return is different if you are a member state that is a member of the convention, because you have shared the objectives of the convention, you know what you talk about, and you know us, etc., etc. But if you are a private sector commercial operator, you want to see something in return. And this is what Mrs. Ogos-Aguilar was saying. There is a difficulty there because sometimes we do not find the proper match. We cannot sell the logo of the convention or the spirit of the convention to a commercial operator just because we need the money. So we have to find a proper adjustment. And sometimes this adjustment is not easy to find. I think we have done some progress. First in creating our own culture and capacities to address this issue, and also creating the interest and the motivation of the private sector. But we are a little still in the process of doing this, and it's not completely finished as a process. It will take time, and I think it will take a lot of goodwill and perhaps also a lot of support from your side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretariat. And before proceeding to taking decision, are there any further questions? I recognize the delegate of Cuba.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais faire référence à l'explication qui vient de donner Monsieur Vandaran, et je voudrais souligner quelque chose. On ne peut pas mettre un prix à la culture. On ne peut pas parler d'un produit, on ne peut pas parler de commercialisation. Pour nous, ça, ce n'est pas le bon chemin. Parce qu'on ne peut pas privatiser ces conventions. C'est une convention des États membres, c'est un comité intergouvernemental. C'est bien qu'on doit mobiliser des ressources, qu'on doit travailler avec le secteur privé, mais sur les priorités de ces conventions. Et c'est une question qui doit être très claire. Je sais bien que vous avez essayé de mettre le plus clair possible toutes ces questions concernant les budgets intégrés, que ça présentait à tous les États membres comme la grande solution de l'UNESCO. Je ne suis pas sûre, mais je pense qu'on doit être très vigilant de quelques questions concernant ces commercialisations, les produits, parce que je voudrais répéter, on ne peut pas mettre un prix à la culture. Merci.
Thank you, Cuba. Any further comments on the part of the Secretariat? No, okay. And any further questions or curiosities on the part of our committee members? Ambassador Anastas, you have some proposed amendment or some general comment?
It is general comment with a precise amendment, actually, both. Can I proceed? Well, thank you. Actually,
yeah, anyway, Ambassador Anastas, we are now talking about, before proceeding to taking decision, just limit yourself to just a general comment.
Well,
okay, thank
it
you.
is general comment, not on what has been discussed for the moment. Actually, I have a general comment regarding the structure of the decision itself. So, in the decision, we have a paragraph that I think it's in another item. So when you come to the decision, I will take the floor again. Thank you.
Okay, let us proceed para by para. Okay, on the screens. Para 1, citing the document we have examined. Do I see any objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 2, recalling the article of the convention that gives us the prerogative to accept the earmarked voluntary supplementary contributions to the fund. Are there any comments, objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 3, recalling our previous decisions. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 4, I imagine there are no objections to congratulate the People's Republic of China for its generous offer to organize the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group for the development of an overall research framework for the convention. I see none. Adopted. Paragraph 5, expressing the concern over the small number of new voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. I think we all share the same preoccupation. Are there any objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 6. Okay, I see Ambassador Munir of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have a small problem with this paragraph because it will come in item 11C. So I'm wondering if we really need to have it here. I think it's out of the subject. The subject is it's much more related to 11C. So my proposal is to delete this paragraph from this decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine.
The reason that this paragraph is in here is because this has been requested by the committee previously. And since it hasn't been received, we have to report in the reporting on the fund that we haven't received it. Notwithstanding that substantively, it belongs also to another one. But financially, we have been requested to do something. We never reported it, so we are reporting that it has not been received. So from a budget point, we're reporting a non-reception of what has been requested.
Okay, Palestine.
Well, thank you, Chair. I understand now the scope behind it. Of course, it's clear. But I'm wondering, in that case, we take note that we didn't receive the needed fund to cover the costs of the open-ended intergovernmental working group on this issue, which is the removal and transfer from one list to another. And this is something that we need. And you know that this is on the table since the 10th session in Windhoek. Well, now I'm wondering, in that case, we are taking note and we have concerns that we have no fund for this open-ended working group. And I'm asking, in that case, why don't, on exceptional basis, if we don't receive funds from donors, why not to use the fund on, I'm saying on exceptional basis. This is the question, and in that case, it could be reflected because you see, on exceptional basis, we will use the fund for something else in item 7, and we are not against. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. And before giving the floor to Zambia, followed by Cuba, I think Secretariat will answer directly to your question.
That decision can only be made by the General Assembly. The committee doesn't have the authority to decide on the use of the fund for that. So that would have to require a recommendation of the committee to go to the General Assembly. We don't understand which part of the fund it would come from. The reason we have it here is the original decision also gave a date for reception. So when we get a request for an open working group, we say to be received by this date. Since the date passed, we have reported that the date has, in this sense, we are reporting the date has passed and the fund did not come. But this committee cannot request the fund from, cannot activate the fund in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Zambia, Cuba, Turkey. Now, first, Zambia.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Being our first time to speak at this session, we would like to begin by thanking and congratulating the Republic of Korea for hosting the 12th session of the IGC. We thank you so much for the wonderful reception arrangements that we made to make our stay in Jeju as comfortable as possible. And then secondly, we would like as Zambia to congratulate Mr. Byung-Hoon Lee for being elected as chair of this session. And then we would also want to congratulate Mr. Tim Cadis and his team at the Secretariat for the quality and volume of work that they have done during the reporting period. We are particularly happy with your conscious effort towards developing partnerships with education institutions to support the implementation of the safeguarding measures mentioned in the Convention. This is a very good approach because we believe it's a guaranteed way of ensuring sustainability of ICH safeguarding interventions. Now, we would also want to thank UNESCO for the continued support that enables most of us from developing countries to participate in these conventions, these meetings, which would have otherwise failed to attend. So we really thank you very much, UNESCO, for that. Now, we were raising our hand on a point that has been already adopted, but we thought maybe we could find paragraph 5 above there. We thought we could maybe refine, instead of saying, expressing the concern over the small number of new voluntary supplementary contributions. I do not know whether we are concerned about the voluntary supplementary contributions or we are concerned about the amounts. I don't know whether it's reading very well, because I was going to think of to be concerned over the dwindling amounts or the lower amounts coming from voluntary supplementary contributions, not the new numbers. Because even if we retain the same odd numbers, if they're willing to increase the amount of contributions, I think it will still be of significance to us. So I thought maybe we needed to come out clear. Our objective is the money. Whether it comes from 10 people or 100 people, the objective is the money. I don't know whether I'm correct in that regard. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful to distinguished representative of Zambia for his very kind words of encouragement addressed to me. And I now give the floor to Cuba and followed by Turkey.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous avons l'impression que ce paragraphe limite un peu les droits de ces comités aussi de créer des mécanismes pour la négociation intergouvernementale. De plus en plus, il y a des mois de temps dans les comités, dans l'Assemblée. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'espace pour faire ces processus de négociation qui demandent beaucoup de temps qu'un ordre de jour, comme d'habitude, dans une réunion de sénature. Et pour ça, qu'à notre impression, il y a une double intention dans ces paragraphes. Et pour ça, je voudrais savoir si ces paragraphes, c'est pour couvrir une responsabilité du secrétariat parce qu'il n'y avait pas consulté l'Assemblée ou pas, parce qu'on ne peut pas limiter les droits des États membres de se rencontrer, de travailler sur une question qui est très importante. Sinon, on doit chercher des solutions en session avant du comité, 1 ou 2 sessions avant de l'Assemblée générale et mettre l'écoute sur l'organisation de ces réunions parce que ça, c'est une organisation intergouvernementale et on doit faire les débats et on doit réfléchir. Pour ça, que je ne comprends bien l'intention de ces paragraphes au fond. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you, Cuba. Now I give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the explanation of the Secretariat, I understand that this is more of a procedural nature. So the committee, in its 10th session, asked the Secretariat to report on this, and that's what the Secretariat is doing now. Would it help if we can make a reference to the committee decision at the 10th session in Namibia? Maybe that could be a way out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey.
Yes, indeed. I think Turkey has exactly identified the issue, that this is a response to a specific request and a report on a specific request that was made by the committee. I think that would make it clear, and that's what we are trying to do. Thank you very much. Just to clarify. Of course, in no way closes the possibility of a new funding appearing. It's just to respond that during the period which was identified during that time, we didn't receive funding. It doesn't mean there cannot be new funding.
Okay, now I recognize Colombia and Palestine. Yeah, first I give the floor to Colombia.
Well, we think that if we are going to talk about to give any budget for the removal of an element from one list or to transfer one element from one list to another, we first have to debate how is it going to be in the point for number 14. So why don't we make first that debate, and then in that point I don't know if it's possible, but we can just talk about this aspect of the budget. So if maybe the committee makes the exception, so for the point 14, we can talk about this budget thing in that point, but right now we cannot make this decision if we haven't discussed about what does it mean to change, to transfer an element from one list to another, how we can remove one element, so we cannot decide that now.
Okay, thank you. I think the Secretariat can react.
Again, please, I'd like to be very clear. The item here is reporting that we were asked to raise funds during a specific period and we didn't raise funds. It is not cutting off any request to raise funds or any possibility to do another intergovernmental working group. That means in Namibia at the 10COM, the committee asked us to organize an open-ended working group on the transfer of an element from one list to another, subject to the reception of extra budgetary funding by January 2017. We did not receive any extra budgetary funding by January 2017, so we are reporting it here. Under item 14, there is another request for extra budgetary funding to continue an open-ended working group. So one does not delete the other. I think, let's be very clear, this is a reporting on the past. It does not stop any request for another extra budgetary funding for an open-ended working group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretariat. And Palestine and Guatemala, so I give the floor first. Ambassador Munir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, in that case, Palestine withdrew the request to delete the paragraph, but maybe we can add a small amendment in the sense that has been mentioned by the Secretariat, which means in case of absence or no supplementary voluntary contributions received prior to the next General Assembly, the committee may recommend to the General Assembly to authorize the use of the fund on exceptional basis for this purpose, which means the organization of an open-ended intergovernmental working group to settle the issue of transfer and removal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. Now, Secretariat.
Just my point is that fund would have to come at expense of something, such as international assistance, expense of implementation of the convention. The standard in this convention has always been that open-ended working groups are to be subject to extra budgetary funding. If we start setting the precedents, to be quite frank, we'd be using more money that should be designated towards operational sides of the convention for continuing more and more meetings, because that is the suggestion. It has always been the practice that open-ended working groups should be subject to extra budgetary funding and not to the fund. We already use almost all of our regular program. Almost all the regular program goes to doing statutory meetings, plus now the money that is meant for an operational side of the convention will be swallowed up by more statutory meetings. That is my comment on the proposal. Thank you.
So, Ambassador Munir, do you agree with the explanation given by Secretariat?
Almost actually. I do partially agree that it is true. Maybe we will make a precedent in that case. But we know that we need absolutely to have a debate on this issue. There is no mechanism for the removal or the transfer, and there are no text in the operative directives. So in that case, maybe instead of requesting or recommending the General Assembly to authorize on exceptional basis, maybe just we can send the question to the General Assembly to reflect on it and to find a solution, because we need absolutely to have a debate on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. Before giving floor to Zambia, I think Secretariat has something to add.
I think if we look at item 14, this is an item reporting on the past, okay? So, in fact, it wouldn't even belong here. I think this discussion should happen under item 14, where there is already a draft decision requesting extra budgetary resource. I don't believe it belongs here, which is reporting on the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard Mr. Tim Curry's explanation about the paragraph 5. I agree with the intentions of the paragraph, except I thought it was focusing more on the number of new voluntary supplementary contributions. So I was thinking it could still retain the same meaning if we said expresses its concerns over the small amount of funds received from voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund to support the programmatic framework of 2014 to 2017. I thought it would read to focus more on how much money was coming in than on the new number of voluntary supplementary contributions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Zambia. But we are now talking about para 6, and para 5 was adopted, even though there are some ambiguity. So regarding this, Secretary, you can add up?
No, my response was in relation to paragraph 6, not paragraph 5, sorry.
Okay, let's continue. It's Turkey followed by Senegal. Yeah, Turkey first. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to support what Mr. Curtis has said. I think the issue of transfer, we acknowledge that it's an important one and we need to debate, but we should debate it under agenda item 14. So we need to keep here the para 6 as it is, but maybe in order to clear the confusion, Secretariat could read the decision 10-19, the relevant para, so that it is clear for us, for all the committee members, this is in response to that decision, this para 6. Thank you.
Paragraph 10. Okay. Paragraph 10 of decision of the decision mentioned there decides to convene an open-ended intergovernmental working group to be held before the 12th session of the committee to discuss draft operational directives on the procedure for the removal of an element from a list and the transfer from one list to the other. This meeting will be organized on condition that voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. I'm sorry for the interpreters if I'm speaking very quickly, but I'm reading. And it continues with the standard. The point is, it says, decides to convene an open-ended intergovernmental working group to be held before the 12th session of the committee. We are at the 12th session of the committee. We did not receive any funds, and so we are reporting here that we did not receive any funds. And this is why the draft decision says the committee regrets it did not receive any funds. The question of whether the committee wishes to request more funds will appear under agenda item 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Senegal first, and followed by Algeria. So, Senegal, you have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais quand même suggérer, si c'est possible, qu'à la discussion de chaque point, pas qu'on ne s'écarte pas, mais ici c'était dans le cadre d'un reporting. Et dans le rapport, il y a des activités sur lesquelles Monsieur le Secrétaire nous a dit ce qui a été fait, comment ça a été fait. Et dans ce point précis, c'était une activité prévue qui n'a pas pu se tenir faute d'une contribution. Mais je ne sais pas, il y a des questions importantes peut-être sur le transfert, mais c'est à un autre niveau. Mais si on doit rester sur... on sort un peu du cadre de ce rapport, parce que ça c'était un rapport, et sur le rapport, il dit ce qui a été fait, ce qui n'a pas été fait, et pourquoi. pour moi, c'était vraiment simple et on aurait pu quand même dépasser cette question. Et si vous voulez, arriver maintenant au point 14, on va discuter sur, le problème de transfert. Mais on prend beaucoup de temps peut-être sur cette question-là. C'était juste pour une suggestion par rapport aux questions à venir, qu'on ne s'écarte pas trop sur les éléments sur lesquels nous avons à discuter. Merci beaucoup, avec tout le respect bien sûr que j'ai pour les points de vue exprimés par les collègues. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Senegal. And Algérie.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Loin de moi l'envie de continuer de débattre sur ce point. Je souhaiterais plutôt vous suggérer, après avoir entendu les uns et les autres les explications du secrétariat, d'adopter ce point dans son ensemble, si vous le permettez, Monsieur le Président. Étant donné qu'on a répondu à toutes les questions et que la référence a été faite à la 10e session de ce comité, je pense que maintenant on peut adopter ce point et avancer vers le point suivant. Je vous remercie.
Yeah, thank you, Algeri. But yeah, for the sake of clarification, Nassim, your proposal is we will adopt the whole decision as a whole at this moment,
Yes,
or para by
yes,
para?
Yes, sir. We adopt the whole decision since we are talking about only reporting. We understand that this is reporting, so let's adopt all the decision and move to the next item. Thank you.
Actually, the whole decision is not reporting. You need to approve the 2 spending plans, just to clarify. So there is an approval, that's all.
Para by para.
Yeah, para by para. Oh, sorry, Ethiopia and Cyprus.
Yeah, I see Ethiopia and Cyprus. Yeah, I give the floor to Ethiopia first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to echo what the distinguished delegates from Senegal have said, to recite how we came to the decision at TEMCOM. We had a case, I think it was from Vietnam, I remember, an outstanding case, and follow up to the debates and discussions we had held with Vietnam. We wanted to understand the case of transfer of items, and we recommended by then, for those of us who were there in that committee, we recommended for more expert meetings and deliberations, and we recommended, the Secretariat by then had asked where the funding would have been, so extra budgetary funding was recommended. And on this decision, it's just a follow-up, as the Secretary have very well explained, it's just a reporting on this paragraph 6. So I really don't see why we don't come to a consensus and an agreement just to pick up the way it was reported. We had recommended the Secretariat to do an exercise, and this decision basically reflects what have been done in the last 2 years. So I just wish for distinguished delegates to consider this and proceed as recommended by the Secretariat, and we can do the discussions, detailed discussions on the way forwards on item 14 as scheduled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ethiopia. Okay, and after giving the floor to Cyprus, let me close the debate on this item, Afghanistan. Okay, Cyprus and followed by Afghanistan. Cyprus, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'était pour appuyer mon collègue d'Algérie, mais simplement, on peut adopter le paragraphe tout de suite et continuer, parce que de toute manière, on va parler à paragraphe 8 de la décision 14 sur ce groupe de travail. Donc, je pense qu'il faut continuer maintenant le travail. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Cyprus and Afghanistan.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, je suis d'accord avec l'idée que ce paragraphe
pourrait rester, mais si on pouvait l'alléger encore, je ne verrais pas d'inconvénient. Par exemple, le mot, pour que ça ressemble effectivement à un rapport à la non-réception d'enfants qui devait être reçu. Par exemple, on pourrait encore alléger, reformuler de telle sorte que, par exemple, aucune contribution volontaire supplémentaire. Le mot supplémentaire ou supplementary, par exemple, pourrait disparaître. On n'a rien reçu, donc pour faire court un message. Et aussi, si ça peut faire ressembler ce message à cet esprit, par exemple, n'a encore été reçu ou have yet been received pourrait apparaître vers la fin de la phrase plutôt qu'à cette partie. Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Ambassador of Afghanistan. And you want to respond to...
Je voulais juste clarifier que supplementary voluntary contributions est un mot technique spécifique. Et c'est pour ça qu'on l'appelle comme ça. Donc on dit supplementary, qu'il soit élégant ou non, c'est le mot technique et spécifique qui correspond à la décision antérieure. Merci.
Okay, thank you, dear colleagues. We almost reached the consensus on Para 6. So if Ambassador of Afghanistan, if you agree, we'd like to adopt Para 6, amended by Secretariat as it is. Is there your comment?
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas de commentaire. Si c'est la formule figée qu'il faut garder, je ne vois pas d'inconvénient à le garder.
Okay, thank you. So, can we adopt Para 6, slightly amended by Secretariat? Are there any objections? I see none. It's adopted. I suppose the committee is happy to thank all the generous donors that supported the convention since its last session. Para 7. Any comment? I see none. Adopted. Para 8 contains two related points. The first one is to approve the two funding priorities for the period 2018-2021 as presented by the Secretariat, and further explained in Annex 2 of the present document. The second one is to accept any future voluntary supplementary contributions received within the scope of such funding priorities and authorize the Secretariat to make immediate use of those funds. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 9, encouraging state parties to further support the convention through voluntary supplementary contributions to the fund and the sub-fund. As the chairperson, I would also personally like to encourage all donors to contribute to the fund through these two mechanisms, as the financial situation of our convention is particularly worrying. Are there any objections? Am I going too fast? It's adopted. Finally, the standard closing para 10, in which the Secretariat is requested to make a progress report at our next meeting. Do I see any objections? None. Adopted. We have now adopted each of the paragraphs, and we need... Oh, Turkey. Okay, I recognize the distinguished delegate of Turkey. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a general remark. As I stated in my statement, we want to see a resource mobilization to be discussed within the ad hoc working group, but with the understanding that we will make an amendment to under the agenda item of ad hoc working group, item 13, I believe. We have not proposed any amendments here with that understanding. I just wanted to make sure with the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Turkey, for your very constructive intervention. And I see.
Is Zambia still? Zambia is asking for the floor?
No, Cyprus first, maybe.
No?
No?
Zambia. I see Zambia, the plaque.
Okay, Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 10, I don't know why we want to restrict it to 13th session. I was going to say that the Secretary reports at subsequent sessions on the progress in the implementation of any voluntary supplementary contributions it may have received since the last session. Subsequent sessions, I don't know whether there's a reason why. Yeah.
Perhaps you'll allow me to explain. This is a standard. Each session we push to the next session and we cite it so specifically. So we will say, you know, the 13th session, and in the 13th session it will say the 14th session, so that in fact we are actually bound to that session. Otherwise we could skip a session. So this is a way of making sure we do it at every session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. Zambia, you want to take floor? No, I don't think so. Seeing no objections, I therefore declare decision 12.com/6 adopted. We can now move on with the examination of item 7 on the draft plan for the use of the resources of Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund in 2018-2019. Many of the achievements by the committee and the Secretariat over the past 2 years have been made possible thanks to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund, to which the state parties contribute year after year. Our functions as a committee are laid down in Article 7 of the Convention. And one of them is to propose for the approval of the General Assembly a draft plan for the use of the resources of the fund. Since we are meeting here in the year before the next General Assembly, we need to examine the spreading plan for the next 2 years as prepared by the Secretariat. I now pass the floor to Mr. Tim Curtis, who will present this document to us. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Allow me just to preamble, if you will, before starting, that the working document 7 is made up of 2 main sections. The first is about the past, and it is the report on the implementation of the fund from the 1st of January 2016 until the 30th of June 2017. And it has a detailed analysis on past expenditure trends, explaining the current situation of the fund. The second part is about the future, and it is a proposed draft plan for the use of the resources for the fund for the next biennium and the first 6 months of 2020, since, as you know, the General Assembly meets in June. The document, of course, includes 2 important annexes that contain most of the information detailed in the first 2 sections of the document. Annex 1 is the draft plan for the use of the resources of the fund, and Annex 2 is a financial statement on the use of the fund issued by the Bureau of Financial Management for the period of January 1, 2016 till 30th of June 2017. So if you'll allow me, I'll take you now through the part concerning the past, and how the fund was used. The total income of the fund is based on assessed contributions, voluntary contributions, as well as interests generated. So during the 38C5 biennium, the total of the income of the fund was $4,660,232 which is 15% lower in relation to the previous biennium. This decline is the result of the drastic reduction of the voluntary supplementary contributions, which we just discussed under the previous item 6. By its resolution 6GA9, the General Assembly approved a budget of $7,977,920 United States dollars for the period of 1st of January 2016 to 31st of December 2017. As we can see in Annex 2 and Financial Statement 1, as at June 30, 2017, the total expenditure was $2,769,000 United States dollars, a 35% of the total budget approved. We will have the time to analyze in detail the reasons beyond this persistent low expenditure rate when I come to present some of the past trends. So in the meantime, let us study this Financial Statement 1 in a little bit of details. According to the budget approved by the General Assembly in 2016, the majority of the resources of the fund, 59%, were dedicated to budget line 1, which is the line for international assistance. As of June 30, 2017, the expenditure rate of this budget line was 19.7% and is expected to rise to around 26% by the end of this year as new contracts have materialized since the end of the reporting period, and notably 2 with Cambodia and Morocco. And 2 projects have recently been approved by the Bureau for Niger. Regarding budget line 2, during the reporting period, 4 states received technical assistance for the preparation of international assistance requests, which represents an expenditure rate of 6.9%. Furthermore, the Bureau approved a preparatory assistance for nomination to the urgent safeguarding list after the reporting period for Namibia, and once this contract materializes, the expenditure rate of this budget line will go to 9%. And here again, we note a dramatic underutilization of this fund. Budget line 3, the other functions of the committee, which we talked about earlier, was at 60% at the date of financial reporting, June 30, 2017, is currently at 89%, and we expect to reach above 95% by the end of the year, by the end of this month. More detailed information on the activities are found in the document 5D in the report of the Secretariat, which I reported to you this morning. Budget lines 4, 5, and 6 corresponds to financial assistance given for participation of experts and non-governmental organizations in the evaluation body and in sessions of the committee, while budget line 7 corresponds to the fees of the members of the evaluation body and the fees paid to the chairperson and the rapporteur of the body for the additional tasks they perform. The expenditure rate of this line necessarily cannot be complete, as we need to have a margin in order to establish the contracts of the members of the evaluation body at the beginning of the evaluation cycle next year, so before the General Assembly approves, for the period before the meeting of the General Assembly. So finally, budget line 8 corresponds to the reserve fund, which was established and which has now reached an amount of $1 million for this biennium, and according to decision 10Com8, at $1 million, the reserve fund will stop getting replenished. So no more allocations will go to the reserve fund. So what I have explained is not a new situation, but it is a recurrent trend as discussed in section 1D of the document. As you can see from the graph displayed on the screens, over the years, the level of expenditure has been constantly lower than the assessed contributions due for the biennium. Since unspent balances are added to the assessed contributions, the total budget keeps growing from one biennium to the next. The insufficient use of international assistance and technical assistance mechanisms by states party is and has been the main cause of this trend over the past several cycles. Those are budget lines 1 and 2. Indeed, efforts by the Secretariat to improve the use of these mechanisms did result in a recent increase in expenditure compared to previous biennia, but the expenditure rate remains proportionally low and well below half of the assessed contributions. If states continue to underutilize the resources of the fund, of course, this trend will just continue, and the total budget will keep increasing in future cycles. The problem will clearly not go away if we don't have a strategy to address it. And at a time when UNESCO is facing severe financial constraints, when our own extra budgetary resources we've just seen have completely dwindled, it seems incomprehensible, and you will surely agree, to have such a fund that is not being fully utilized. So allow me now to go to the second part, which concerns the future. And again, please refer to Annex 1. So in Annex 1, you have the draft budget for a period of 24 months, 2018 to 2019, plus the first 6 months of 2020, because as I explained, we still have activities in those first 6 months that need to continue, to be approved by the General Assembly in the upcoming session, its 7th session in June of 2018. We calculate the budget for the first 6 months of 2020 based on a quarter, 25% of the total biennium approved budget. So for the period of 1st of January 2018 to 31st of December 2019, the amount of the spending plan to be submitted to the next session of the General Assembly is estimated to be approximately 8.3 million. So this time, the Secretariat's proposal includes the creation of a subline in the spending plan to enhance human resources in order to improve the implementation of the international assistance mechanism. This is proposed specifically to address the problem of systematic underutilization of international assistance. And since this is a new proposal, I hope you don't mind if I take a few minutes to explain the context of such a proposal. First of all, I'm pleased to report, and to be able to report, that there are several positive points that I can highlight in the way international assistance has been administered. Since the establishment of the procedure, 39 state parties had been granted financial assistance from the fund for a total of 3.7 million and in support of 69 projects. It is encouraging to see that 63% of the requests approved were submitted by states parties from electoral group 5A, Africa, representing 2.23 million of assistance granted. This is, of course, in line with UNESCO's global priority for Africa. The significance of international assistance as the operational window of the Convention has been stressed in many instances. The mechanism enables a comprehensive and realistic picture of the safeguarding priorities and actions of states. The projects implemented through international assistance also have the potential to supply a major learning tool for the Committee on the implementation of the Convention, for example, as a repository of good safeguarding practices from which others can learn. So the Secretariat has been reviewing our working methods and making efforts in optimizing the way we handle international assistance. And I'm pleased to report that during this biennium, we were able to increase by 40% the number of international assistance files presented to the attention of the Bureau, in comparison with past biennia. However, I need to point out, while this increase is the result of an intensification of work concerning the processing of requests, just to get the process approved by the Bureau, what remains is the important workload which happens after that, related to the establishment of contracts, the establishment of payments, the monitoring of progress, the work we have to do with the state party once the financial assistance is received to make sure the project actually gets implemented. So while we've increased in the last year by 40% the amount of approvals we've processed, this creates extra work in setting up those approvals and getting them working. So it's not something we can just sustain at the same rhythm by keeping increasing. Every time we increase an approval, we also have to follow through with getting the project going and working with the state party. And so I'd like to point out that the monitoring that we do at this stage involves mainly budgetary and administrative monitoring. And we're missing out in this way on opportunities that this operational mechanism of the Convention could offer in terms of learning. Substantive monitoring of the projects should be an important dimension in the implementation of international assistance, as it could help states parties to create favorable conditions for safeguarding ICH in both the shorter and longer terms. An in-depth analysis and comprehensive evaluation of the results and impact of the projects could be highly useful for understanding the effective implementation of international assistance and a promising means of informing the overall implementation of the Convention. Of course, this would require a substantial investment in terms of time and resources from the Secretariat. Dear committee members, the involvement of the Bureau and the Secretariat in the implementation of the international assistance mechanism is expected to grow, as we have already witnessed with the increased ceiling of the assistance examined by the Bureau from 25,000 to 100,000. So in a basic sort of business model sense, by increasing the scope for demand, it is also necessary to increase the ability and capacity to supply that demand. And it is very clear at this stage that the Secretariat's capacity simply does not allow for more than the basic administrative follow-up, and not the substantial monitoring, as I've mentioned earlier. So with regard, as we've mentioned before, the section of the Secretariat, the ICA section, is composed of 8 professional and 4 general fixed-term staff. This is a 20% decrease since 2010, in a moment when the obligations on core statutory processes, preparing statutory meetings, including draft documents supporting evaluation body with its work, treating nominations, non-governmental organization requests for accreditations, reviewing and following up on periodic reporting, open-ended working groups, and so on. All these other functions, and then let alone capacity building, are just increasing in demand. And we have reduced by 20%. So nowadays, the Secretariat has no other solution than to turn to temporary assistance to cover some of these functions. With regard to international assistance, the roles and responsibilities are divided among several staff, fixed and temporary, over and above their primary responsibilities. So this is why the draft plan proposed includes a new budget line, 1.1, to cover the biennial costs of 2 new extra budgetary fixed-term posts at a P3 and G5 level, to form a team dedicated to fully activate the international assistance mechanisms and effectively monitor and evaluate its implementation, which is so much needed. The creation of extra budgetary fixed-term posts is proposed so as also to ensure stability and continuity of the results. And so budget line 1.1 should also form part of future plans. But of course, the funding of such posts will be continued, as will the overall budget, subject to approval at each General Assembly. As you can see, we have Annex 1 on the screen. This budget line would mean around 5.4% of the total estimated budget for the next biennium. To absorb this new percentage, slight decreases are proposed in certain budget lines without risking the objectives of any of them. It is also worth mentioning that the interest received on the balance of the fund for the next year would cover, or initially, 40% of the costs of these 2 posts. So allow me now to turn to other parts of the proposed spending plan. Budget line 1 will be assigned once more with the greatest allocation, this time at 54.85%, and the slight decrease of 4.15% in relation with the current plan will be dedicated to cover most of the newly created budget line 1.1. Budget line 2, which is the preparatory technical assistance, also being highly underutilized, only at 9% implementation rate in the last biennia, will decrease 1 point in percentage from 5.5 to 4.5. Once again, this is used to cover the creation of the 2 new posts, and in order to work on improving the low utilization of these mechanisms. Budget line 3 is the budget line for other functions of the committee, which we've already discussed today, and is proposed to be maintained at 20%. As previously approved by the committee, the funds allocated to this budget line will be specifically dedicated to capacity building program and all the global upstream work that needs to be happening there. The integration of ICH into development plans, policies and programs, and as we have discussed, with a focus on ICH and education. And I remind, this budget allows us to do the upstream work, which then generates projects. Improvement in the management of the knowledge, information and monitoring of the convention, and this is very important, includes key things like our ability to supply all the online information related to statutory meetings and so on, and the databases that have been generated over time. And of course, to promote the objectives of the convention through the awareness raising and outreach, which we discussed earlier. Allow me also to remind committee members that this line is dedicated to upstream work at the global level, which allows then for the implementation of projects and programs at national and regional levels through extra budgetaries. Budget lines 4, 5, 6 and 7 will be maintained in general at their respective percentages, with slight changes in order to be better aligned with coming obligations. I'll come back to this because, in fact, the Secretariat itself will have a slight amendment on these issues based on our experience this year. What we will propose is a slight amendment to allow us some flexibility to move between the lines. I remind you, these lines are related to the cost of participation of experts, of committee members, of states parties to the conventions, and accredited NGOs. And what we have found, because of, first of all, we don't know where the committees are being held and what the exact costs are and what the demands are, we will be asking for flexibility between the lines so that we know we can use them all. So what we have in 1 year is one category is full up, and then we have 2. So this year we were not able to meet enough demands of developing countries to attend the committee, while we had funds remaining in the line for committee members or for NGOs. So we would like to be able to make sure all the funds are used effectively by having some, that will come later. So what would be the implication? Considering this new scenario, if the draft plan is approved eventually by the General Assembly, the objective pursued by the Secretary is to reach an optimum level when the total budget approved equals assessed contributions and expenditures. We need to try to get the fund working back where it's intended to. It's been getting bigger over the years, so that we can have a fund that's a recurrent fund. I think it was mentioned earlier, we're not getting extra budgetary money. But it's difficult to request extra budgetary money when donors see a fund that's not being utilized without understanding that this fund has to go through all of these mechanisms. So we are in a real bind here. So that we've got a graph here that shows that if we can increase, first of all, the assessed contributions will increase, and if we get new state parties, of course, they increase. We aim to increase particularly budget lines 1 and 2 by 40% over the next 2 biennium, and then sustain that. So that means next biennium, if we can manage to increase by 40, the biennium after by 40, that's 4 years ago, and we sustain it, it will still take us some sort of 14 years until the 44C5 before we get back to the situation we want to be in, where the assessed contributions are being maximally used. So if we don't address this problem soon, it's only going to get worse. And so that's the situation I present to you. So allow me to talk about the 2 amendments we want to propose based on the requests we received. we are proposing 2 new paragraphs in the decision. They were not included in the document because, as I said, it relates to issues we faced this year concerning the process of granting financial assistance to experts from developing state parties, NGOs, representative NGOs, to participate in the sessions of the committee. We're recommending you now to try to make an efficient as possible service to as many developing states and NGOs so that they can participate in the deliberations, as well as to clarify procedures by the Secretariat. In recent years, the Convention has been reaching near universal ratification, and we are receiving more and more requests to cover participation for state parties, experts to the committee. And so this year, the demands exceeded the available resources allocated, and it's the second time for this purpose, and for the second time in a row, and more than last year. So last year was the first year where we didn't have enough resources to meet all the requests, and this year we had to refuse more requests. At the same time, the budget allocation pertaining to financial assistance for participation of committee members and representative NGOs remained partially unused. In total, about 25% of all the funds allocated to these 3 lines remained unused during the last biennium. So with 175 state parties, 164 accredited NGOs, and a committee that we don't know where it's going to be held, it is, you will understand, very difficult to predict exactly which amount needs to be allocated under which of these specific lines, and therefore the new paragraph 8 is proposing to allow us to make transfers up to an equivalent of 30% of the 3 lines so that we can optimize their use. Finally, paragraph 9 is a proposal to amend Rule 5.5 of the Rules of Procedure in order to revise the deadline by which requests for assistance from state parties to participate in the sessions of the committee and its bureaus should reach the Secretariat from 4 to 8 weeks. And the reason, because first of all, we've been applying this informally since 2014. We've applied an earlier deadline than the one specified in Rule 5.5, and we've always informed the state parties of this in invitation letters. The reason we do so is the deadline stipulated in Rule 5.5 is impossible to abide by the administrative regulations of UNESCO, according to which tickets need to be booked no later than 3 weeks prior to the departure date. In light of the large number of requests received by the Secretariat, not only does the deadline of Rule 5.5 not allow us to abide by international administrative rules, but it does not give enough time to even respond to all the requests we've received. An earlier deadline also ensures we can cover the costs of more experts, as tickets prices tend to be lower when booked well in advance. So the proposed amendment is seeking to rectify the tension between Rule 5.5 of the Rules of Procedure and the administrative regulations of UNESCO. I'm nearly finished, but before ending, I'd like to bring to your attention some figures on the state of compulsory assessed contributions as of November 24 of this year. As you know, Article 26 of the Convention states that without prejudice to any voluntary supplementary contribution, state parties to this convention undertake to pay into the fund at least every 2 years a contribution to be decided by the General Assembly, which in no case shall exceed 1% of its contribution to the regular budget of UNESCO. By 24 November, 40% of the contributions due for 2017 remain unpaid, as at that date was $879,928. I shall also mention that 15% of the state parties of the convention did not make any contribution during this current biennium. I've come to the end of my presentation. I hope that I have provided all the information that the committee members would require to examine this important item. I remain, of course, at your disposal to answer any questions, and I'm happy to be here together with the Administrative Officer of the Culture Sector, Mr. Abdelghani Bakrim. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the detailed explanation of the use of the resources of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund since 1st January 2016, and for the presentation of the plan for the use of its resources for the next period 2018-2019 that include important and necessary changes for the improvement in the implementation of the fund in coming cycles. Before plunging into adopting the draft plan and the decision, I'd like to open a general debate and give the opportunity to members of the committee to raise their questions, which I will ask the Secretariat to answer after the debate. Allow me just to recall that in accordance with Article 5, Period 1 of the Financial Regulations of the Fund, the use of its resources is based on the guidelines laid down in Chapter Roman 2.1 of the Operational Directive approved by the General Assembly. Now the floor is open. Turkey first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first thank the Secretariat for the report and the extensive briefing. And we heard the two items that you are proposing. I mean, we welcome the idea, but I think we need to reflect on them. It would be good maybe if you can reflect on the screen the proposals that you will be making to the decision. Having said this, as emphasized in the previous agenda item, though there is some improvement, we continue to note with concern that, that while the fund continues to grow, but underutilized at the same time, extra budgetary funds to the ICH fund for capacity building programs, as well as to the sub-fund for the human resources of the Secretariat, continues to diminish. As a remedy to this problem in the short term, access to that fund has been improved by giving authority to the Bureau for approving international assistance requests from $25,000 to $100,000. However, it could not be considered as a permanent solution for the following reasons. First of all, this does not address the issue of monitoring of the funds from the perspectives of both finances and intangible cultural heritage. Access to the international assistance have been eased both in terms of scope and rules, but provisions related to supply or delivery still remains to be addressed. Secondly, access to funds by raising the financial limit of the Bureau for approving international assistance requests from $25,000 to $100,000 oversteps the role of the Bureau. In particular, in line with the recommendations of the ad hoc working group on governance regarding the role of the bureaus, we should be cautious in giving such responsibilities to the Bureau. On the other hand, we welcome and support the proposal of the Secretariat to create a new budget line to cover the costs of 2 extra budgetary fixed-term posts who would work for activating the international assistance mechanisms and monitoring and evaluating its implementation. In fact, it would be even more favorable if more than 2 fixed-term posts are allocated for this purpose. But in the meantime, the committee needs to consider a comprehensive long-term approach as it is about to become a chronic problem for the Convention. The committee has to look for solutions that would allow the Secretariat to effectively deliver international assistance to the requesting states parties. This issue needs to be addressed together with the broader resource mobilization strategy of the Convention in the context of the structured financing dialogue. Accordingly, as we said before, we will propose that ad hoc working group must be mandated to analyze the funding issue as a whole, both underutilized funds as well as the extra budgetary funding. In this regard, as we have said before, we will have some amendments that we will introduce under agenda item 13. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ethiopia followed by Philippines. I give the floor now, Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to thank the Secretariat for the extensive explanation and for sharing issues which need our serious attention. As I have mentioned it in my intervention this morning, this convention has been achieving a lot and is being more and more attractive, and this should be very much encouraged. However, the growing workload regarding the international assistance and the resource of the Secretariat doesn't look balanced enough. International assistance mechanisms are very important for our continent. The assistance Ethiopia has received had helped a lot in developing inventory mechanisms, developing nomination files, and national guidelines for capacity building to create awareness on the convention amongst practitioners. As mentioned in the report of the Secretariat, a very small amount of the available fund was utilized, and this is primarily due to the limited human resources as depicted. While we have unutilized financial resources stuck in the bank, it really doesn't make sense to claim for strain on resources to best effect the convention. I think we need to understand the everyday reality of the Secretariat capability and decide to best capacitate the ever-growing pattern of demands from the states parties. In view of achieving more and in view of effectively implementing the convention, we strongly support the request to open extra budgetary positions. This will enable an appropriate follow-up and monitoring of its implementation and propose measures to help us better benefit from the resource available in the fund. This is only a temporary solution due to its extra budgetary nature, I believe. Although we would have preferred a more sustainable solution, we support the proposed decision given the financial situation of the organization. I thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. And now I give the floor to distinguished permanent delegate of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the report under this item. We note with concern that the utilization of international assistance remains low, although some improvements have been observed this year. We think that targeted workshops and meetings will be needed to further improve the rate of submission of requests from other regional groups. In this regard, the UNESCO field offices with presence on the ground can be better utilized. We support the initiative to have dedicated staff for international assistance. We note that they shall be funded through extra budgetary resources. However, we would like to inquire as to who are the donors and if these posts cannot be sourced eventually through the regular budget. We can imagine that this post will be required on a permanent basis, but provision of extra budgetary support fluctuates over time and hence may not be able to guarantee their sustainability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Austria.
Thank you. Please let us renew our appreciation of the Secretariat's work, and its efforts are clearly reflected in the figures in front of us. For instance, when we see that the utilization of the ICH fund in budget lines 1 and 2 have considerably increased. The main reason is, of course, the increase in the ceiling for international assistance requests that can be presented to the Bureau, implying, of course, an additional workload for the Secretariat, and it is highly likely that this trend will continue in future cycles as well. However, we agree that there is still room for improvement, particularly as regards international assistance, which is the primary function of the fund according to our operational directives. We understand that further activities to encourage or rather enable state parties to ask for international assistance require additional human resources in the Secretariat. We also understand that the costs for additional posts can, in a short and mid-term perspective, not be covered by cost recovery as generally foreseen for activities related to the fund. We therefore support the proposal by the Secretariat to establish a new budget line for 2 additional fixed-term posts in order to fully activate the international assistance mechanism and effectively monitor and evaluate the implementation. However, once the fund is more extensively utilized, the staff costs should be covered to an increasing degree from resources stemming from cost recovery. We would like to hear the Secretariat's analysis about how long they assume that these 2 posts would need to be covered by the additional budget line from the funds, and what would happen to the posts should the General Assembly decide in the future, in a future cycle, not to prolong the budget line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. And I think there are no more speakers on the part of our committee members. Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est d'abord pour remercier et féliciter le secrétariat pour le rapport très clair et les explications assez détaillées. Même si on note une évolution qui est quand même une évolution à saluer, la situation reste quand même une situation assez paradoxale. Parce que quand nous prenons le cas des pays, des États parties, notamment ceux d'Afrique en développement, les besoins sont énormes. Et il y a une sous-utilisation des ressources qui sont mises à leur disposition. Pourquoi cette situation? D'une part, il y a un problème de ressources humaines, il y a un problème d'élaboration de projets, de programmes aptes à capter ces ressources. D'autre part, il y a également au niveau du secrétariat un problème de ressources humaines également pour traiter tous ces dossiers. Ces 2 paradoxes nous amènent à effectivement trouver des solutions. D'une part, le renforcement des capacités dans ces pays, mais d'autre part, le renforcement également des ressources humaines au niveau du secrétariat. Il faut effectivement que le secrétariat puisse traiter de toutes ces questions, puisse avoir suffisamment, si vous voulez, de ressources pour traiter ces demandes, pour traiter un peu l'afflux de besoins exprimés par un plus grand nombre d'États qui ont ratifié cette convention. Pour dire d'une manière très claire que le Sénégal appuie fortement cette proposition de permettre au secrétariat d'avoir 2 postes budgétaires à durée déterminée pour pouvoir faire ce travail. Merci.
Okay, thank you for all these very relevant and excellent comments. Before I give the floor to delegates of the Republic of Korea, I think I'd like to invite at this moment your secretary to respond to some questions raised by our committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I think in particular there were questions from the delegation of the Philippines and of Austria. I think perhaps I should clarify to the delegation of the Philippines that this is not funded by donors. The posts are proposed to be funded by the fund under the International Assistance Mechanism. But these are considered extra budgetary posts in the UNESCO framework, even though they are considered under the fund. But we are not proposing to be looking for donors. This is meant to be under the fund. And I think Austria asked what would happen should a General Assembly not approve this subline sometime in the future. And in that respect, I think I'd like to give the floor to the administrative officer of the culture sector. Thank you.
Oui, merci. Mais avant d'essayer de répondre à cette question, je voudrais préciser une chose parce que la délégation de l'Autriche aussi a évoqué la question de recouvrement des coûts. Alors, si vous décidez de recommander à l'Assemblée générale la création de ces 2 postes, ce sont des postes extra-budgétaires. La politique de recouvrement des coûts ne s'applique pas pour les postes extra-budgétaires. Donc, en quelque sorte, donc, il y aura une diminution de les prélèvements sur cette partie 1. Ça, c'est d'un côté. En fait, donc, on aura une réduction du recouvrement des coûts qui va être un petit peu compensée par la ligne 1.1. Pour ce qui est de la décision éventuelle de l'Assemblée générale, qu'un jour ne décide pas de renouveler l'extension de ces deux contrats, bien évidemment, donc, s'agissant des postes établis avec des personnels, avec leurs droits, etc., le moment venu, éventuellement, le secteur s'efforcera de trouver les moyens de les accommoder avec le programme régulier. Mais donc mais pour le moment, pour le 39, le 40, C5, la situation est tellement critique que c'est un peu difficile de prévoir de créer ce genre de poste, sinon on l'aurait déjà fait. Merci.
Yeah, we have two more speakers, one from the committee member and another Japan from the observer member. I now give the floor to distinguished delegate of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The government of the Republic of Korea appreciates the Secretariat for presenting the draft plan for the use of Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund in 2018 to 2019. My delegation finds the Secretariat's proposal to create two fixed-term posts for international assistance reasonable. Given the increasing workload of the Secretariat with its limited manpower, we believe the ever-increasing demand for the international assistance, as well as accumulating a fund allocated for the cause, indicate the need for a viable solution and for the region. We find that it is worth giving it a try. Still, my delegation asks the Secretariat to report to the committee how the strength manpower contributed to the vitalizing the international assistance programs in 2 years' time, so that the committee and the General Assembly can be assured that they had made the right decision by approving this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. As last speaker, now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to acknowledge the efforts of the Secretariat, and we hope that the resources of the fund, the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage, would be used effectively. In order to grasp the needs of the submitting states and respond timely, it is not enough to strengthen not only the budget. We also need to reinforce human resources to improve the implementation of the international assistance mechanism. Therefore, Japan would like to support the draft plan, which includes the new budget item listed in Annex 1.1. We also intend to continue working with UNESCO and member states to contribute further to the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Japan.
We just have to say the Bureau tomorrow morning.
Announcement.
If you want.
Okay, we are slightly behind the schedule, but it's very tolerable. So we have to stop here, and we'll continue tomorrow morning. And before adjourning afternoon meeting, I'd like to invite our secretary to, if they might have some announcements.
Just to remind that from tomorrow morning and every morning, the Bureau will meet at 9 a.m. in the Hala Hall on the 3rd floor in order to adjust the provisional timetable if needed. The vice chairpersons from Bulgaria, Colombia, Cote d'Ivoire, Palestine, and Turkey as well as our rapporteur, Mr. Gabor Shosh, please be there on time so that we can begin promptly. The meeting of the Bureau is, of course, open to observers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Excellencies, dear colleagues. I declare the afternoon meeting adjourned.